Welcome, everyone. I know we're just a minute or two early, but we'll give everyone a second as you come in. Thanks for making time on your Friday. It's always, I know, a good time and a bad time. Fridays we look forward to, but they're often the busiest day of the week. So thank you for joining us on this first Friday in September. And before I get started, I will just make note of the fact that I have a brand new kitten. So if you see me wince, it's because he is actually biting my toes. So I'll make that caveat. My name is Andrea Sampson. I am the CEO and founder of Talk Boutique and also the founder of the Thought Leader Academy. Today, I'm very privileged to have Andrea Reindl as my guest. Andrea is a brand strategist and an owner of Legacy Creative. And Andrea's on a mission to simplify complicated jargon that overpromises and instead paves a path for people with ideas and teams that support them to be able to bring their visions to life. This is really all about creating plans and adding timelines and budgets. I know those sound maybe a little bit boring, but they are so incredibly important. And as thought leaders, this is one of the things that often we get caught up on. Andrea and her team at Legacy love to take chaos and tame it. Oh my goodness. If you are a person who lives in chaos, like sometimes I know I do, this is something that we all need. And she brings in common sense business practices that are end user focused and rich in quality experiences. Andrea and the Legacy team have done things like double annual revenues for companies, set up new programs and products, hosted epic live events, and helped digital business owners create substantial businesses. And this is what we're going to talk about today. She loves to work with high-performing people with big visions that turn those visions into a brand and a business. She's a single mom with 2 teenagers, so you can tell she's a little bit busy. She runs a business and runs a family. So, Andrea, I am so happy to have you here with me today. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and we're talking about, this concept of actually turning your thought leadership into some form of revenue generation. And I think it's one of the hardest things for all of us if we're in the world of thought leadership. How do we take what we know? I mean, often we're asked to speak, we might be asked to be on podcasts, but that's not really a true business in and of itself. So in your experience, because you've worked with lots of people like me and like those who are joining us today, how do you help us to make money? What in your experience is the best way for thought leaders to monetize what they know and what they offer to the world?
hmm So typically, when I work with thought leaders and authors and people like you, the first thing we talk about is what is their business model? How do they define something that's a business model? And for as creative as I am, I often think in spreadsheets and like a P&L. So at the end of the month, when you're looking at your reports, where does revenue come into your business and where does it go out of your business? Just in a straight, the simplest way. And so that starts to define a business model. Of course, there's other things to a business model, like what is the value that you're providing to your ideal client and those kinds of things. But for thought leaders, very often where they get stuck is that they're not really sure how to container a program or a product, or what is it they're getting paid for. So there's thought leaders that get paid to speak on stages and their primary income is keynote speeches, and that's part of their business model. And often for some of them, that's like their primary business model. Well, that's very different from someone like you who runs a community and their primary business model is like showing up for a community and doing things like this and providing value for that community every month. You have the same community every single month and people get added to it. And other people have like the on stage speaker that's the keynote, they're in front of new people every month. Now, yes, to every business, like sometimes people say, oh, but it's not just that quite that simple. And you're right, it's not. There's lots of nuances to the business, but really defining how you want to make money and what your business model is where I start with everybody. And as a thought leader, I think there's so many amazing ways to make money. Like it's my favorite place to play because there's so many different ways to do it.
I want to come back to something that you just said, which was put a container around your thought leadership. And
Yeah.
I love that term because I think is probably, again, one of the things that we don't think of, right? We think of what we do as sort of what's the outcome from us. But what do you mean by a container, and what might that look like for monetizing a thought leader business?
Yeah. So when I say a container, I mean, at the beginning, like every morning when we wake up, we have to decide what we're going to do with the 24 hours ahead of us. Well, hopefully you're not awake for all 24 of them, but you're going to decide what you're going to do with value in your work hours, right? And so when I say container, I mean having a really clear strategic plan of what are you doing during your day that provides value to your clients. And so
Mm.
when you get clear on that, you actually get clear on what are you doing that generates revenue in your business. And so a container could be something like, I don't, it could be something like, you've got a signature digital program and you run it 1 or 2 times a year and you spend 6 months of the year generating relationships and then 2 months of the year delivering that uh, that signature program. That could be one model for a business, like for a thought leader. Another model could be, like I mentioned, like with you, your membership. So every single month you're thinking about ways that you're going to provide value to those members and what are you doing on a weekly basis and a daily basis and Q&As and membership. It's different than a person who only has a signature program they run a couple of times a year. Or, like I said, a keynote speaker, their relationships really are how their container around where they need to be spending their time and energy is refining their skill as a speaker and also curating relationships with their clients who are usually either corporations or event producers.
I think you make a really interesting point, looking at that strategic plan. And I know, like you said, in our business, we have a membership model for our Thought Leader Academy, and we have a couple of different revenue streams. But that one is a time intensive one for us, right?
Oh, yeah.
We really believe in it, and that's why we offer it. But we have to be thinking all the time about the value that's being created. What is it that our members need? How can we best serve those members? And do we have the resources to be able to do that? And those resources, are they reflected in the way in which we're actually monetizing that membership? Because all of it's value for value. And then on the other end of it, and when we look at speaking, we also work in that world. And I think it's the thing that I get asked a lot, which is, oh, how do I get on more stages? And I often say to people, well, there's lots of ways you can get on more stages, no question. But if you are in the early days of figuring out your thought leadership business and your thought leadership in general, is being on a stage the best place for you? Because it's high risk. And let's face it, in those early days, you're not getting paid for every talk. So
Yeah.
is it the best place to start a business model? So if we go back to looking at all of the different ways, you talked about doing a signature program. Maybe we can delve into that, because I think this is something that most thought leaders don't actually understand. A, what it is, and B, how to, even if they do understand what it is, how do you even get started? And I know this is an area you do some work in.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So when I talk about a signature program, another way to say the same thing is a signature method also. So very frequently it's you have a particular thing you're really, really good at, whatever that thing might be, like it could be helping, like, well, let's just use you for example. You're great at helping people decide their like signature talk and how they're going to deliver that talk. I know that's something you spend a lot of time doing. So you have
Mhm.
a particular way that you take people through that. And like the number of steps that you're identifying when you're working with a client and you're trying to figure out how to structure their talk and what comes first and then what comes next and how do they open and how do they close and all of those things. You have a particular way you do that. So if you were going to create a signature program around that, you would really like first map out all the steps that you work on a client with, whether it's a client
Mhm.
that you're working one-on-one or you're working with like 3 or 4 at the same time. And that starts to become the base of your signature program. And what I find for most thought leaders and people that are in the space of that we're talking about right now is that what they do maybe comes really naturally and intuitive to them.
Yes.
So because it feels easy, they don't see it as valuable as it really is. Something that's easy for you is not going to be easy for me. Something that's easy for me is not going to be easy for you. So I think the beauty in finding your signature program is really being able to articulate what it is you do probably intuitively and the value that you bring to other people. And then you asked, where do you get started and how do you begin to build that into a program? Typically, I find with almost everybody, the steps are pretty simple. Usually, you'll deliver it one-on-one to people and you'll do some sort of like consulting or package for them. Then a lot of people move into smaller groups. You're like, oh, I can do this with one person. Maybe I can do it with 4 or 5 people. And I'll do that with 4 or 5 people and have an admin staff help me do some of the things I don't like, the activities that I don't need to do in that. And then eventually it can scale to doing the same sequence or the same method with maybe 400 or 500 people, or thousands, really. It doesn't, like, it's really limitless once you identify what that method is.
I love that, you talk about the fact that what you do easily is not what others do or even find easy, right? And I'm sort of laughing to myself because I'm listening to you say, well, it's really simple. And I'm hearing you show us your thought leadership, because I think it isn't as easy for other people. And I think you see it in such a way that it's very clear, and you just laid out a really clear path. First, you start with what you're doing, you codify it, you go, what am I actually doing? And I remember the early days when I first got started in this business, and it seemed to me like, well, it's pretty easy. Here's how you do a talk. And I started to learn that actually it's not easy for most people. And then I had to deconstruct myself. What
Yeah.
am I doing?
Yeah.
And that was actually pretty hard. It was like, I don't know because I just do them so intuitively. And are they the same with every person? And they were mostly when I really started paying attention to it. So, as you're working with thought leaders, where do you come in? Because I can hear it. You know this stuff. I can hear that in the way in which you just described that. So where do we bring you in? And when would a thought leader, can they do this on their own, or do they need to work with someone like you?
Yeah, so I'll answer those two questions. When do they bring someone like me in or a method like mine in? Is really when you've started to get success somewhere. So again, this could be like you're working in a consulting fashion and you're working with companies, you're working one-on-one with people, and you seem to be getting a reasonably consistent result. So it's sort of like, I think of myself a little bit more like a chef guidance, not a baker. Like, it's not, baking, if you don't measure exactly,
Science.
do not get those cookies. I do
Yeah.
not make cookies. My sisters both do. I don't. Like, my cookies are always like, well, Andrea, it's a cup of flour, not like a cup ish that you
Ish.
eyeball. Like, that's not how baking
Yeah.
works. So I think a little bit more like cooking, where you can get away with that ish thing. Like, okay, how much chili powder do you put in? How much salt do you put in? Like, it's a little bit more intuitive in how you do it. So I do think of it a little bit more like cooking, not baking. But there is a time where you start to get a consistent result. And so if you're doing work and you're like, okay, I've done this with 5 people and I'm getting a consistent result. I know how in the baking and cooking example, you just go with cooking. You're like, I can make chili and I can get it pretty dang close every time. That's when you want to start thinking about documenting and defining what it is that you're doing. And first, it's really defining it, and then it's documenting it. And so that's really when you want to think about bringing someone in. I'll tell you what, I don't know what you did when you first started, but when I first started realizing that I had a gift and that I needed to turn it in, or I desired to turn it into a business, and like, if this gift doesn't get out of me, I'm going to feel very like wound up for the rest of my life. So I might as well just do it. What I did is I opened a spreadsheet and I kept it open while I was doing anything with work. And then I would just note, what am I thinking? Who am I working with right now? What's going on? What did I use to get to the next step in a project, or the next step with someone? What questions did I ask? And I just started noting it. It is almost like I just observed myself doing my job.
Yeah.
And that began to show patterns to me, where I could then organize the patterns into something that became procedures and steps and a way that works for just about everybody.
Yeah, I remember a similar thing. I mean, for me, like, as you asked that question, like, how did I do it as well? And I know for me, we came up with some frameworks early on. And what was interesting about those frameworks were, we leveraged off of some very simple frameworks that were already out there and were very commonly used. And what happened though was that I started to notice, similar to you, is that I use them differently. I asked different questions. The way in which I brought things together was different than the way the framework was intended. And so I took an existing framework and created my own. And from that, then suddenly I started to see my own process illuminated. And it was an interesting thing because I mean, I'm very much a, I need something to start with. I'm not, I'm not that place of, I can have nothing and go to something. I need a starting point. And I think for so many entrepreneurs in general, I think we always start with what's the problem? What's the problem we're solving? And in that case, it was, how am I actually working with these thought leaders in such a way that I'm pulling their ideas out of them effectively so that we could get to that stage presentation, and in many cases that TED talk that they actually wanted to get to. And so that's interesting, if you do that as a program. So when we're yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say what that really makes me think of so frequently is that you asked, when do you bring someone in? What thought leaders often have is that they need somebody to bounce stuff off of and somebody
Yes.
to observe that thing. Like what you just said there was really powerful, or I got curious when you said that. Because again, it comes often very naturally for them. Or the other thing is, and this is really true of subject matter experts, people who are subject matter experts and have a deep knowing and understanding of any particular subject, they have a very hard time simplifying that for the general
Yes.
population because
Yes.
they know all the contingencies, if this, then that, if this, then that. And so often when they're trying to explain that to somebody, they don't know where to start, and because they know too much. And so
Yes.
an intelligent novice like you would be when you're helping someone organize a TED talk, or I would be when I'm helping them organize their method, we can get to what are the core big concepts and then how do you nest everything underneath that. So when they're feeling like they don't know where to start and what to do next, that's really when they want to bring in an extra expert to help them organize that method, that content, that program, and then break it apart for them.
I think you've just touched on something that is so incredibly important. And it's, I was working with a client this morning and I had that exact conversation with her because she is an absolute expert in her field. And
Yeah.
she knows so much about her field. And we're working on a talk for her. And and she should be very critical in terms of what gets said when and how and where. But to your point, because she knows so much, being able to step back to a place of knowing nothing, which is what the audience comes in as. And,
Yeah.
it's what I describe as meeting your audience where they are. And to try and meet that audience where they are is very hard when you're an expert. Right. And
Yes.
I think this is one of the differences, and we talk a lot about moving from, change maker or expert into thought leader. And that's the piece, right? It's that ability to move out of your own expertise, to know what you know, because you do know it, and own that, but give space for the audience to catch up. And the way
Mhm.
we do that, and it's what I teach a lot of, which is through story, because when we tell story, we're no longer in our expertise, we're in our own vulnerability.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting point. Um, when when you're working with an expert and
Mhm.
helping them, because you are helping them to step into their thought leadership, um, how do you help them know that? What is the way in which you're actually helping them to see how much they know versus how little their audience might know?
Yeah. So you're asking, how do I help them do that?
Yeah, what's your role in that? Because that's a challenging piece, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. So usually what I do is I am a very curious listener. And I have them, almost every single one of my clients after I work with them will say something like, wow, I've never actually explained my business like that before. And it's because what I'm doing is asking strategic questions to put together, like where I'm trying to understand their business and understand what they know and understand who their ideal client is. That's a huge piece of it. Like
Yeah.
who mostly do they want to teach to or work with or help? And then where is their ideal client in their own journey? Because that's really how you craft a winning offer and a really successful business, is understanding that really, as thought leaders and subject matter experts, we're here to solve problems for other people. That's how you make a profitable business, right? Like that's what we're here talking about. You want to make a profitable business. All you need to do is find a huge problem and go solve it really well.
Well, and
So
you
understand
just said it too, is and for who?
for
Who
who.
is your
Yes.
target audience? And I think this is another piece that often gets overlooked. We think we know who we're solving that problem for, but if we haven't spent the time to really identify who that person is and test out the solution with them, are we any further? So is that something that you like in your process? Because I mean, I'm hearing it, you do have a really disciplined process. And so what part of the process, where does it come in that you're saying who's that target audience, and how do you make sure and test that that is the right audience and the right solution for them?
Yeah. So my process really comes down to three things. The first is what does my client need? So in this case, we're talking about that subject matter expert, the author, like where are they at in their life? What is the business they want to create? What kind of income do they want to create? What are their strategic objectives in lives? How much, like how much time do they have? Somebody who's where I was 10 years ago when I was like a single mom with littler kids and my time was so tight is different than who I am now, where my children can drive cars and earn university and my time's not quite as tight. So first, I understand my author, that's part of my process. The second part, which is this audience piece, is we really dive deep into who are we serving. And that means who is the ultimate end user of whatever business model we're going to put together. So sometimes that's corporations, sometimes it's individuals, a lot of times it's individuals. And so we need to understand who our audience is and where they're at in their journey, what their problem is, and how we're solving it. And for how long are we going to solve it? Like there's, some people who come in and the product and the program that we design is like to solve one problem, like get your kids not to be picky eaters, right? That's probably once you kind of get over the hurdle of having picky eater kids, you're over the hurdle. Other times, what you're doing is actually like guiding them for a really, really long time. So then you're working with your clients for a really long time. So really understanding who is your audience, how are you going to transform their lives, and why are they going to pay you is probably where we spend at least 50% of our time talking. Because when you are clear on that, everything else starts to become clear. Pretty soon you're like, oh, I have massive empathy. I understand who I'm helping. I understand what they need. I understand
Right.
how much money they have
Right.
in the budget to pay me. I understand how much time they have to give me. Like, this is one thing I wish more people thought about is how much time are you asking for from your audience? Because right now, whoever's watching us, thank you. You're giving us the precious, valuable time of resource that you're never going to get back again. So if people are giving you their time, that means so very much.
It's a
So
gift.
understanding time, money, energy, relationships, all those are currency that you're trading with people. So the more you understand your audience, I think that's the key to designing
Yeah.
a business that works. So we probably spend 50% of our time or more on that. And if we ever get off course, I always go back to like, do we have the right audience at the right place? And then you asked about testing. The easiest way to test is do a few interviews and ask people, say, okay,
Yeah.
this is my ideal audience. This is who I want to talk to. Why don't I go interview 10 of them and find out what their problems are? Because they will tell you. If you are an active listener, you can learn anything.
Yeah.
People love to
I
be listened to.
I was working with a client this week, and is exactly what we did is we designed a questionnaire for her to go and talk to her target audience, because the reality, when I worked in branding, of course, this was something that, and I know you worked in branding as well. This was like one of the first things that we would do, right? Is to do some stakeholder interviews so that we understood who we're talking to and what language they use.
Yeah.
And when we can use their language and we can define the problem through their lens, it feels to them like we understand, and we do. It's not
Yeah.
just that it feels that way, we actually do.
And as thought leaders, the beautiful thing, if you have any sort of a digital program, is you can design the product for exactly what it is that they need.
Right.
So one of my dear friends had a program where he was great at hiring assistants. So he thought he would design a digital program that he could sell to people for, these are all the steps to hire an assistant. When he interviewed his ideal clients, what they said is, can you just hire the assistant for me? Like,
Right.
I don't want to watch
Yes.
your videos and hire an assistant. I just want to give you a boatload of money and you hire me a great assistant. Done deal. It's such a problem for so many entrepreneurs. So instead of designing a program to sell to them on how to do it, he just provides it as a service now. That came from avatar interviews and understanding a business model that would match his clients. And that's an example of what I mean, where you really, you have a skill, you're good at
Yeah.
something. Oh, I know how to hire assistants. Great. How do you turn that into a business? Selling a how-to program is very different than providing a service of doing it for you. And that is what I mean when I talk about business model.
I think that is, and I just want to like just reiterate that, because I think what you've just said is so incredibly important. When we look at our audiences right now, often they do split into two different categories: those that want a done for you service,
Yeah.
and those that want to do it themselves.
Yeah.
And they can look like the same person on the outside, right? They can be demographically, psychographically, all the same, but it really comes down to the appetite for a solution. And
Yeah.
so for some, doing it themselves is really important. It might be a function of time, it might be a function of cost, it might be a function of many things. They want to learn that, and they're ready to take it on. And doing a do-it-yourself approach it requires a commitment, and so you need to know that going in.
Yeah.
Others, like the client you just described, he wanted a done for you service.
Okay.
He's like, I don't want to look, I know I need an assistant. I don't need to know how to find that. I just want somebody to give me one.
Yeah.
And I get that, because I know in my life, like there's a lot of things that I'm willing to pay a premium to get a done for me solution. But then there are other things that I know I actually need to know how to do that myself. And so I'll invest the time, the money, the energy, the commitment to learn how to do that. And, I think for you, I guess, as you're coming into it in your business, that must be something that you're really helping people to understand.
Yes, I help my clients understand, what are their clients looking for? Are we giving them training? Are we giving them services? Or we get whatever that might be? And we do at my company, we actually do implementation for people. So we build it out. And
Right.
because we build it out, we have a different framework of understanding critical decisions that need to be made at certain times. If you really want something actually to come to life and be built, it's very different than an imaginary idea. Like a working business that you could sell to someone has very different components than an imaginary idea based on your thought leadership. So that's, I'm always coming at the frame from, how can we make it real, and how can I help my clients understand that? What are you providing to your end users?
Andrea, I'm just looking at the time. I can't believe we've
I know, I
almost
just
been half an hour. I'm like, oh my God, we could talk about this forever. What I love about what we've talked about today is really this concept of helping those who are stepping into their thought leadership, who might be in that place of subject matter expert or change maker, even, who probably is doing things in a really intuitive way, and they're stuck because they're like, well, maybe I need to speak more. And that's really kind of the only way in which they're seeing monetizing this knowledge they have. And what I love about what you've shared with us today is that you're showing us that there are many other ways. And one of which is really just understanding how you do what you do and turning that into a service.
Yeah.
And that is really clear. Like, and
Yeah.
not easy. And
Yeah.
that's where people like you and the service you offer helps them to pull it out of them. And I love, and I know, I mean, for those of you who follow me, you'll know that I have the Thought Leader Academy. And one of the things that I'm so excited about is Andrea has agreed to be part of our Thought Leader Academy and is going to continue this conversation in a couple of weeks, in our guest expert and in a coaching capacity. So she's going to down even further. But before we go there, Andrea, how can my guests keep in touch with you beyond the Thought Leader Academy? I know that you've got a YouTube channel. I know that you've got some other things. So tell us some of the things that you've got on the go that our listeners can actually access you directly.
Yeah. So I have a YouTube channel. It's under Legacy Creative on YouTube. You can find us there. And every week we drop a new video with a how to, like, behind the scenes. This is what we're doing. I'm a big how to make it real kind of person. So not a lot of theory, a lot of, these are the steps. This is what you do. They can also catch us at legacycreative.com if they want to come over and see some of the services we provide for people. And then, of course, I actually interact on LinkedIn quite a lot. So I think that's where we're streaming today. And I'm totally available on LinkedIn if people want to have a chat. I offer free strategy sessions for people because sometimes you just need somebody to talk to figure out what your next step is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And for those of you who are interested, because I am such a believer in what Andrea does, and I'm so excited to have her as part of the Thought Leader Academy, we've got a really special offer for you to join the Thought Leader Academy. If you're not familiar with it, what it is an online platform, much like what we've been describing here today. It has a multitude of pre-recorded materials, but the real game changer is weekly group coaching. And so the group coaching happens every week with one of our coaches, and we coaches in the area of communications, branding, community building, strategy, and mindset. And of course, Andrea comes under the strategy and mindset area. She's joining us on September the 21st, and she's going to be talking about your thought leader business model, which is a powerful, powerful talk. And it's really about how to make money as a thought leader. On September the 14th, which is next Thursday, our coaching always happens on Thursdays. Maria Angelica Forio is going to be talking about building your confidence to charge for your ideas and your time. And Maria Angelica is a mindset coach. So both of these are amazing sessions coming up. The offer that we're giving is that you can join the Thought Leader Academy for a week for just $1. So you can join today. You can get access to Maria Angelica's session next week. Get a sense of what's there. Go onto the platform and be able to experience it yourself. And I think you'll find that it is well worth it to join us. We have amazing, what I call thought leaders in the making there, who are doing great work. It is a peer community who you work with, and you have access to all of our coaches. So I hope to see you there. And Andrea, sorry, I'm going to call you my name.
It's okay.
Thank you. Is there any last thoughts you might want to leave people with just before we sign off for today?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a plug without giving you a plug. I think one of the things that I see with my clients so frequently is when you start down the journey of taking your thought leadership and turning it into a business, one of the best things you can do is go and find a community of like-minded people, because you are not likely to be able to have conversations about your business while you're also at the hockey rink, doing evaluations for your child, which if you're Canadian, that's what's going on right now, and you have kids. It's not an everyday kind of conversation that you have with everybody in your life. And so having the community of people that you can go to say, hey, I'm stuck in my business here. What do I do next? Or who's been in this case and they can work, like who's been here before and who can help me know where to go next, or just collaborations. Like I'm looking for podcasts to get on. Who do you know? It is such a valuable thing to have a community. And I think it's one of the things I always tell my clients to make sure they're in multiple communities, that they're connecting with people who are like-minded. So I like what you're doing with the Thought Leader Academy for that reason, because you need community support, live show up, live coaching, live talking, people helping you solve your problems in the minute, because it's not a cookie cutter approach. You need a little bit of customization.
Yeah, thank you for that. I really appreciate that, because that is it was the come from place why we created the Thought Leader
Yeah.
Academy,
Yeah.
and every new person comes in adds something new to the community, and that's what's so exciting about it. It's never the same community twice.
No, and we live in a time right now where there's so many opportunities for subject matter experts that are willing to show up for their own communities and willing to show up and build a business to build massively thriving businesses, because people have a lot of problems we should get on solving. And subject matter experts are the ones who should get on solving them. So
Well,
it's
yeah.
just exciting times to be alive.
And, I just want to add to that, because you just, sort of one of my passions is that we need more diversity of thought leadership, right?
Yes.
Because we're creating a future, and we don't want the present to be our future, right? Like, I think we can all agree that there's some problems in our world today, but if we have better minds actually creating that future and more diverse minds, we're creating a much better place for us all. So thank you so much for your time today. I am very appreciative of it and honored to have you. So thank you.
Thanks.